Well, living in survival is living in stress. And as we said a moment ago, stress is when your body's knocked out of homeostasis, when it's knocked out of balance. We have different types of stressors. We have physical stress like trauma or injuries or accidents. We have chemical stress like pesticides and pollutants and flus and bacteria and viruses and heavy metals. And you have emotional stress like traffic jams and internet connections and second mortgages, single parenting, 401ks, family tragedies. And every one of these things, physical, chemical, or emotional, knocks your body out of balance. Now, human beings, we're so unique because we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. Instead of being chased by a lion, which was highly adaptive thousands of years ago, we turn on this primitive nervous system to mobilize all of this energy for some threat in the environment. That function allows us to begin to survive in those conditions. But when you turn on the stress response just by thought alone, you start thinking about some worst case scenario. You start imagining what will happen in some future time. What most people don't know is their body begins to physiologically change as if that event is happening. As they think about a past bitter memory that's tattooed in the recesses of their gray matter, and they attend to that thought, that memory, to the exclusion of everything else, the body literally begins to produce the same chemistry as if that past experience has happened. Now, the body is the unconscious mind. It doesn't know the difference between an actual experience in your life that creates an emotion you fabricate by thought alone. To the body, it's the same. So people tend to knock themselves out of balance just by thought alone. Now, here's the key. Those survival hormones, those adrenal hormones, give the body and brain a rush of energy. And we begin to become addicted to that rush of energy unconsciously. And we begin to associate the problems in our life to reaffirm our emotional addiction so we can remember who we think we are as a somebody. So when it gets time to end the relationship or leave the job that doesn't work or change some circumstances in our life, it becomes very difficult because we can't predict the feeling of what's going to happen next, and we hold on to the addiction so that we can remember who we are. Now, this is why change becomes difficult. And when we live in those survival states, without a doubt, we become over-focused on the self. We become selfish because the emotions of anger and aggression and hatred and judgment and fear and anxiety, pain, suffering, hopelessness, powerlessness, those emotions that we call normal emotions are derivatives of those hormones of stress. And when we live by those states, we typically become very self-indulgent, very self-centered, very self-serving.
The equivalent of having to flee from a lion, right? So you don't really care about much else except for you want to get there.
You want to take care of your body.
You want to get the F out of there.
That's right. You want to make sure that you're number one. And so when we begin to turn on the stress response just by thought alone, then it's all about the self. Now, who we really are isn't a body living in this environment, an identity in the environment, identifying with the people we know and the things we do, and living in linear time. That's not who we are. We're not materialists. We are actually pure consciousness, living in a body or using a body to express ourselves. So, if you think about it then most people spend the majority of their life using their senses to determine reality. They're materialists. And when we live in that state, really the hindbrain, the primitive brain, is actually in control. We're reacting to everything in our life. Now, the creative state is the antithesis. When you're in a true state of creation, this amazing thing happens. You forget about yourself. You become selfless. You become nobody. You become no thing. You become no time. And when you do that properly, where you begin to speculate a new possibility and you begin to invent a new way of being, or you begin to create something in your mind, the forebrain turns on, the crowning achievement of the human being. And it begins to lower the volume to time and space, so that the only thing that's real in that moment is a thought. And when that happens, the brain captures the thought as the experience, then upscales the hardware to install the neurological circuits and change the brain ahead of the actual event. And in that moment where we move from survival to creation, and we forget about our normal self, the hormonal centers turn off, And the energy moves right up into the heart, and you begin to fall in love with the moment. You begin to get in the present, and you begin to forget about the future and the past, and you're in that present moment. That's what I call the natural state of being.